Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and this is Just Thinking. Welcome to our annual series of interviews of candidates for local government offices. The town election is May 20th. We have contests for select board between a challenger and an incumbent. For park commission, we have 4 candidates for 2 open seats. For school committee, we have 4 candidates for 2 seats with 1 incumbent. And for library trustees, we have 4 candidates for 2 seats. 2 candidates are incumbents, but 1 incumbent declined to be interviewed. That was an incumbent for the library. I am interviewing all these candidates. I have prepared specific questions for each board or committee. Each candidate will respond to the same questions for that office in their interview. I ask a few different questions of incumbents to reflect their years of service. Voters can compare the candidates' responses. The interviews are done one at a time and will be posted when all the candidates for an office have been interviewed. My goal is to have the videos run 30 minutes, except maybe longer for school committee. I had a lot of questions. The videos will be available on HCAP's website, on HCAP's YouTube channel, and on our Facebook page. Let's get started. So now let's move to interviewing Jessica Ommen, who is a candidate for the school committee. Jessica, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. All right, so just relax. We're all good here.
Trying.
Okay. I will remind viewers that the school committee has 3 very specific areas of responsibility under the law: hiring and firing the superintendent, policies, and the budget. They cannot manage the day-to-day operations of the school. So, why are you running? And is there a particular topic or issue that kind of motivated you to do so?
Yes. So I've kind of always wanted to run for school committee. It's just been a matter of when. My twins will be entering kindergarten, and they're the youngest in the fall, so I now have the time, saw the opportunity. I also followed the school start times discussion very closely, and many people will tell you I'm running because I was unhappy with the outcome of that decision, which I was, but that's not why I'm running. I'm running because I saw an opportunity that came out of that process for me. I think, I paid very close attention to the whole process of the start times, and I, as a former project manager, was concerned about how it was managed. It didn't seem to have, the subcommittee meetings did not really stay on course. It kind of swayed in all different directions. There were no clear deliverables. At the end of the subcommittee meetings, additional information came out that would have changed the subcommittee decision potentially. And ultimately, I just felt like, as a former project manager, I would have approached that very differently. It would have been much more structured. I think a school committee member should have been leading those subcommittee meetings, and they weren't. And I kind of just, after the decision was made, continued to follow school committee meetings, and I saw a very similar kind of situation unfold with the high school schedule. There wasn't much organization. Lots of back and forth, and it ended up in students and families being wildly confused. So I think, for me, yes, the start times was kind of what prompted me to run this year, but ultimately, I think I have something to offer the school committee that is missing, and I think it's that organization planning pice.
Okay, all right. Project management in what kind of business?
I was in marketing primarily. So my last job was with Aetna. Before that, I was with Staples for a little bit. And I did work, my favorite role was with educational nonprofit travel company. So yes.
Okay. Now, you sort of segued into question 2, which is what differentiates you from other candidates? Do you have a unique experience? Let's go a little bit deeper into what project management means and how it translates to what you're talking about with school committee processes.
Yes. So, one of the things, I've been in discussions with some current school committee members about various things, and one of the things with the school start times was they didn't feel it needed to be structured because there were so many emotions involved in it. And
that's the best reason to structure it.
And that was kind of my take on it. I felt like, you almost need to try to remove the emotion from it in order to come to a decision that is going to be representative of the community. And I know that there's going to be emotion that comes with it. But again, I think to your point about project management, I worked in the creative marketing department. So like we made brochures and like put together websites. And there are a lot of emotions and egos that, I was up against the creatives versus who are the visionaries versus, the business folks who are all about like the bottom line. So I think, being able to manage those two things and being like the mediator between them is something that I think is going to be valuable as a school committee member. I think, that definitely would have been valuable in the school start times decision. And I know that there's many other decisions that are coming up that are going to be hot topic items. And I think I have the skills necessary to, help make decisions that are representative of the community.
Okay. What will be your priorities?
My priorities. So there's a few. I'm kind of operating under 3 umbrellas. One is the planning for success. I think, as these decisions are made, we need to have a clear plan. We need to find ways to engage the community. We can't just develop subcommittees and give them no clear direction. We need to say what we're looking for, when we want it. I'm going to go back again to the start times. For example, the decision kind of came down to a spreadsheet that was shared with the school committee just minutes before the vote. That information should have been presented to the school committee months prior during the subcommittee meetings. The gentleman who shared that information was on the subcommittee. So there's no reason that couldn't have been shared earlier. And I think if the school committee had clearly defined those expectations from the beginning, we may have had completely different results.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So, yeah,
that's one
umbrella.
That's one umbrella. The other one is effective communication, transparency, and collaboration. And what I mean by that is I think there's a big discrepancy between communication, and I know that's been a topic
Forever.
for a very
For
long,
all boards,
yes.
all committees, all departments,
But it's not just communication to the public. It's not. It's also interpersonal relationships. I think amongst leadership within the schools. I think there's a lot of tension between administration and teachers, and administration and the school committee, and school committee and teachers. And I think sometimes egos tend to get in the way of making real decisions and being able to collaborate and listen to what the other person is saying. I would like to see a lot more collaboration between those groups. I would like to see a lot more involvement from the community, which I know is something we've
talked about often in another life or on a sidebar.
On a larger scale.
Yep.
But I think within the school committee, that's definitely something that also needs to happen. How do we engage the community, not just families and students and families who have children in the schools, but taxpayers who might not have, children in the schools. I think they deserve to know what's going on and where their money's being spent. I know many have grandkids in the Holliston schools. So I think better transparency. And then the other part of that was from the school down. to families. I think it's improved drastically over the years. When my daughter started kindergarten, I don't think we had a newsletter from the principal at that time. We do now, and I find it immensely helpful. And we do from the superintendent. And I think those are very valuable assets to the community. But I still think there's something missing. For example, like last week, my daughter got off the bus, and she said she was confused because there was somebody on the bus that wasn't typically there. She thought it was the bus driver's wife, which obviously was not the case. But she was like, oh, we weren't allowed to talk on the bus. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I reached out to the principal. Turns out it was somebody from the bus company that was doing like a ride along to help address the behavior issues that they were having on the bus. I, as a parent, would have liked to know that there were even behavior issues to begin with. I had no idea. To me, it seems like common sense first step would be reach out to parents and say, hey, we're seeing behavior issues on your child's bus. Please, remind them what appropriate behavior is. I think that kind of shows a sense of collaboration and trust amongst the school and parents. I think it's sometimes difficult for parents to, it doesn't feel like they necessarily work hand in hand. And I think that would have gone a long way in establishing trust for me personally.
Okay.
And then, sorry, the final one.
You might want to move it a little
I know,
quicker.
sorry. Quality education is my last one. And I won't say much about it because it's going to spill into, I think, some of your other questions. Remaining competitive with our neighboring districts. I know we're talking about the math curriculum and possibly de-leveling. I think that's, I'm very concerned if we do that. I think we need to meet students where they are. And I think, I think having a robust curriculum is going to be beneficial for us in the long run. It's going to help us remain competitive. Families want to raise their kids in schools that, offer a lot. My kid might not be great at math. They might have more of an interest in, computer science or art history, whatever it may be, and I think that depth and breadth of programming is going to go a long way. So.
Okay. How do you think you're going to determine budget priorities? Because nothing happens without the money.
And it's getting increasingly more difficult with the federal cuts. So this is a very challenging question for that reason. We have no idea what it's going to look like once the federal cuts take effect. So I think, again, I'm going to go back to collaboration. I think we need to decide what's most important. As much as I was just talking about the depth and breadth of our programs, I'd love to see more, arts curriculum in the Holliston schools. I also realize that with cuts happening, that's not likely to happen. So how do we preserve what we currently have? How do we continue to grow our schools with the limited resources we have? I think that's going to, involve working closely with the Finance Committee, working closely with administration, because they're really the experts in their field, and working closely with teachers for the same reason, and also again to kind of get feedback from the community and understand what it is that community members value in their school system.
I'm going to add something here and make a note to ask everybody the same question. I'm not sure what the relationship can be between teachers and school committee members. I don't know if they're allowed to talk to one another.
That's a good question.
I honestly don't know, but I think it's something that we all need to bear in mind, whether or not there are any limits in terms of contract negotiations and stuff that say that teachers are to be buffered from having 4 million different people reach out to them. I don't know. I may be making all of this up.
I'm wondering about like scheduling meetings, that would make sense, but I'm wondering things like surveys, like the survey went out for the school start times, and that didn't seem to be an issue. I mean, not that I want to bombard everybody with surveys, because God knows we have plenty of those.
And I never really see where they end up. That's the other thing about surveys. But anyway, that's just an asterisk there. I'm going to check, but I think I will ask other people that if you are limited, if the school committee as a body may be able to do things that school committee members as individuals cannot.
Yes.
You know, would you look at that as being an area of, this is kind of a leading question, unfortunately, but as an area of discussion, you know, why is that the case, and is there an opportunity for there to be real interaction between teachers and school committee members? Don't know the answers.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so on average, on the whole, how do you think the district is doing? And this would be at all three of the levels. And you use the word competitive. Do you think we're competitive, and what are our strengths and weaknesses?
So I think on a national scale, we're doing phenomenal. I think when you get a little more granular, I think, you know, we're not doing as well as we have in the past. You look at neighboring districts. I mean, when I moved here 10 years ago, Hopkins and Holliston were like neck and neck with rankings, and Hopkinton has since soared. Now, I understand their financial situation is quite different. But I think we need to remain competitive. I think, again, going back to the de-leveling, I think that's something that's going to be very, very important as we move forward. To keep in mind, how do we remain competitive with our neighbors? We live in, I mean, Massachusetts has the best schools in the country, and the greater Boston area even more so. So it's challenging, I guess, in a way, because we might not be performing quite as high as our neighbors, but we have to keep in mind that we are actually doing pretty phenomenally well. And we want to continue to do well and find ways to remain competitive as our neighboring districts are also becoming more and more competitive.
Tell me a strength you think we have.
A strength. I will say, I think the French and Montessori programs are phenomenal. I don't have a student in either one yet. Montessori lottery is coming up, and I'll find out. But I've heard phenomenal things. I think it definitely gives us an edge. I think people come to this community for those programs. I know people who have school choiced into Holliston for the French program. I think that's great. I think those are definitely reasons people will send their families to Holliston.
Okay. What do you see as the greatest challenge right now for the whole district?
I think, again, the federal funding is going to be a challenge moving forward. I think, again, what's the word I want to use? The lack of collaboration that's been happening. I mean, I think, again, I kind of ties into your last question. You know, a few years ago, the teachers union voted no confidence in our superintendent. Her contract is coming up next year, so that's going to be a challenge for us moving forward. And then the HFT this year.
That's the Federation of Teachers.
Yes. There was the lawsuit, so school committee had sued them and vice versa. And I think, you know, those are things that make it difficult to get anything done and make any real progress. I think those are things other communities, or if you're thinking about moving to Holliston, those are things you see there in the news and you think, oh, maybe we should look elsewhere. This doesn't seem like they know what they're doing right now. Yeah, I think that those two things, I think collaboration and the federal funding is going to be the biggest challenges moving forward.
So, and you've talked about some of this, so you may not have much to say here, but would you say that you're satisfied with the direction that the school committee has operated in the past 5 years? And if no, how would you suggest change? And for those things that you have liked, what are those?
I will say if I was 100% satisfied, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. Yeah, I do. I'm going to move on to what I do like. I will say very recently I've noticed some committee members, Hillary, put together a really lovely plan for the math curriculum project. I'm going to call it a project. And, you know, she had timelines, deliverables. There was a clear plan, and I was very happy to see that. And I was watching the meeting from home and said out loud, oh, they should have had this for the school start times. And just almost immediately as I said that, Frank said the same exact thing. And I was like, and I know it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment, but I couldn't agree more. And I was really happy to see that kind of realization and like, okay, we learned from this, let's try to move in a new direction now. And then Frank dove in even more and was asking, how do we get the community involved early? It's important that they get involved early so that, you know, we're not making these last minute decisions. And I think, you know, I was really, really proud to see that. I've voted for both of them. So I was very, very proud to see that kind of unfold.
The kids did well.
Yes, yes, it was, yes, I was very proud of that. But like I said, yeah, I wouldn't be here if I was 100% satisfied. I think there's, you know, I think I have that leadership, collaboration, and those planning skills that have been missing.
I'm going to jump ahead and then come back to these questions, but I want to talk about the math curriculum since we've interjected it a couple of times in this conversation, and not everybody understands what that's about. The de-leveling of math is basically saying there are no levels, there are no advanced placement, you are not moving along a progressive levels of what you are able to achieve, so that you can end up in high school coming out, graduating without calculus. And there are many students for whom that's an issue because the colleges are basically expecting you to arrive with calculus under your belt and not expecting to teach it to you. There are those folks who would argue that it is better to have all of the kids, no matter what level, in the same environment, and allow the teacher to work with each student individually to create a plan by which that student can advance. And so in that setting, perhaps some kids can get the calculus. We've heard a little bit about your feelings about it, but let's just expand on it and we'll dispose of that question.
So I think that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the teachers. I think teachers do their best to teach to the individual student already, and I think that's you know, in a more leveled class, I think that's possible. In a de-leveled class, that's I think it would be very, very challenging for them. I'm going to speak from personal experience here. I went to a private school in middle school, and 38 kids. There were no levels. My friends at public school were taking pre-algebra. I think some were maybe even taking algebra. I was bored, and I was capable of doing what they were doing. Fast forward, I ended up going to a public charter school, but it was a very competitive school. Curriculum was intense. It was all advanced level classes. I essentially skipped a year of math, and it was wildly challenging. The expectation was that I would take calculus by my senior year, and there was no path for me to get there. I was so far behind, like that. It was bad. I think we need to think about, like you had said, you know, some colleges, some programs do require calculus in order to get accepted to the program. I also think we need to take a step back and think about students who might not attend Holliston High School and what that gap might look like for them if they do end up going to, a charter school or a private school where the curriculum is a little bit more robust. We want to make sure that they're prepared for that. I mean, I guess I speak from both ends of the spectrum where I would have benefited from a higher level class, and then when I got to high school, a lower level class. I really, really believe that de-leveling it is not going to be in the best interest of our students. It's not going to be in the best interest of our district.
Okay, so now we've dispatched the leveling, de-leveling, and it's so funny because it's hard to remember that de-leveling is not making things, it's making things flatter.
Yes.
And that the levels are those things, the graduation of different levels of expertise.
Yes.
So the words are a little bit awkward. But anyway, so how are we doing for time? Well, we're pressing. Okay, out-of-district placements of students typically cost us more money than in-district, how much we pay. And yet the out-of-district placement requests have been rising. Why do you suppose that demand has risen? Do you see that as a problem? And what would you, as one member of the school committee, do to determine why?
So, again, I think families are going to do what's best for their family. I think, as we've seen, other districts, do phenomenally well. Parents are interested in exploring those options. The other districts might offer, for example, Millis has a Spanish immersion program. Yes, we have French immersion, but there might be families that prefer the Spanish immersion program. Things like, I hate to say it, but special education. I know families will often seek other districts because they're more able to, support their child than Holliston is. I think that's something we definitely need to look into, something we need to be sensitive about. And I think, just in terms of like what's going to work for your family, it's not just the curriculum. I think many families are looking elsewhere because of a better curriculum or higher rankings, whatever it may be. But I think just in terms, I guess what I'm trying to say, I would be remiss if I didn't say I have not considered this as an option for my own children. And I think it's just trying to figure out like who your child is and how Holliston is going to nurture my child. For example, again, the school start times. I'm extremely concerned about my daughter next year. She struggles now with a 9 a.m. start time. Her teacher has told me she's tired all day. She's having trouble staying focused. I start bedtime with her at 7:30. There are nights she doesn't fall asleep till 10 o'clock. So I don't know what's going to happen next year and what that's going to do for her educational career in the long run. If she's not able to absorb this information at such a foundational level, what's that going to mean for her by the time she gets to high school? So it's a concern, and we're going to see how next year goes. It could, be a non-issue, but I think, families are thinking about what's going to work for them. Is this the kind of lifestyle I want for my family? And I think you see a lot more out-of-district placements at the high school level as well because of those curriculum differences. Like I don't believe we have a computer science program.
Right, we used to, but we don't.
Exactly.
And so a lot of kids go to Keefe Tech.
Keefe and Aggie and.
Yeah, my granddaughter went to Aggie.
Yes. So I think, finding ways to bring those kinds of programs back in district would be incredible. But again, budget constraints. So it's something I would love to talk more about and look into while keeping budget in mind.
Yep. The school district has recommitted itself to the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this was after President Trump called for a renunciation of that. So how do you feel about this local response? Do you think we continue to need a professional administrator dedicated to the work? Are there other ways that we can or should be doing this? No clue, but what's your thought?
I think, so for me personally, again, I think learning about different cultures is such a important part of a child's education. It teaches empathy, and as we're talking about, social emotional learning as being one of the pillars in our schools, I think you have to have DEI. Like you have to talk about that if you want children to be empathetic and celebrate our differences. I am very happy with Holliston's response. I'm very relieved that we live in a state that is also protecting local districts against the federal orders. Yeah, I have been very pleased with Holliston's response.
Okay. I don't have children in the schools, and now I don't even have grandchildren in the schools. So, and that's true for 2/3 of Hollistonians. So you alluded to this earlier in how do we get these outsiders, and I consider myself an outsider to the system, how do we get us more aware? You mentioned a couple of things that I was like, really, I never heard of that, kind of thing for me. So do you have any specifics about what you would try to do?
Yeah, so I think I would first like to understand what it is that, those individuals are interested in knowing, because I don't want to throw out information out there that
there's a field trip on Friday.
Yeah,
right.
You don't need to know that. The school committee meetings are already posted on HCAP, but people don't necessarily have the time to sit and watch all of that. Meeting agendas come out ahead of time. Folks can sign up for that and find, meeting minutes after the meetings. With that said, I don't think that's enough. It's not a clean, digestible way to absorb information. I would love to have some kind of newsletter go out to the community, not specific to those outside of the school or inside of the school district. I would say kind of similar to what the superintendent does, but less school-related and more school committee related. So big issues that are coming up, hot topic items, like I'm not even sure the start times discussion was obviously a very heated discussion amongst families within the school. I'm not sure if you didn't have a child in the district, you might not have had any clue what was going on. So I think information like that needs to be shared so that those community members can be pulled in and their voices heard as well. Even things like the budget override last year, how is that money being spent? Those are things that I think I would like to kind of include in a newsletter that would be of interest to the entire community, not just the school community.
Okay. Last question. Okay. At the end of your term, looking back, what are the top 3 items you'd like to have accomplished?
Well, I am not running to change the school start times. However, I think it's really important that we keep a pulse on that. There's so much data that supports a later high school start time for the high school students, and I don't dispute that at all. There's no data for the younger kids. There's absolutely no studies that have been done. So I think we, as a community, need to keep an eye on that. I don't know how we assess that. But are students' test scores dropping? Are they fatigued at school? I think we just need to keep a pulse on it. I think there were also many concerns that came up from families that were left unanswered by the school committee. One of the things is after-school care. I know several years ago when this was also a debate, the school committee back then, I believe, reached out to the YMCA and was looking at ways to offer more childcare options in town. That didn't happen this time around, and we have now twice the demand for after-school care. So I would like to continue exploring options like that. Another thing I would like to look back on, we have Dr. Kuska's contract is coming up in 2026, which would fall under my term. I think by default something would be done there, but I think for that, again, community engagement, and I know I have heard from people that her last contract was renewed despite the teachers' vote because of the community didn't offer enough feedback. They did not complain, and I don't know the validity of that. But I would like to understand, I know it's going to be a hot topic item. I know there are families that absolutely love the work she's done, and there are families that have been wildly critical of her. And I know that's going to be a very sensitive thing, so I'd like to be able to look back on that and feel like I made a decision that was as best representative of the community as possible and in the best interest of our children. And then the last thing, I'm totally blanking.
I'll give you one, and that would be, you've talked a lot about process and planning,
Yes.
so maybe that the school committee has adopted some processes.
Yes, thank you.
You've been saying it over and over again, so it's not like I'm giving you a new idea. But
You said
it's
last question, and I saw the finish line, and
it's
just,
just taking off for that. Huh?
Yeah.
All right, well, there's one more piece here, and that is that 2-minute
yep,
pitch.
yes.
And to do that, we're going to have you look at camera. Which one? This one. Camera one. There we go. Love the coordination here. And you got 2 minutes. Just say, why should I vote for you?
All right, I might not need the full 2 minutes.
That's
We'll
all right.
see.
That's all
You should vote for me because I'm a former project manager turned stay-at-home mom. I'm a PTO member and have been a lead classroom coordinator in my daughter's classroom for the last 3 years. With my youngest starting kindergarten this fall, I'm ready and excited to dedicate my time and energy to being your school committee representative. I care deeply about building strong, positive relationships between families, students, teachers, and school administrators. I believe that real progress happens when there's a mutual respect and collaboration across the entire school community. I'm especially passionate about inclusive education and advocating for the unique learning needs of neurodiverse students. I believe in a robust curriculum that incorporates arts and STEAM classes to help students develop critical thinking, creativity, and problem-solving skills that will help them in the real world. As a parent, I understand the importance of being heard. That's why one of my top priorities is staying connected. Listening to your ideas, your concerns, and making sure that the school committee's decisions are representative of the community. My background in project management taught me the value of planning, communication, and working toward clear goals. Combined with a passion for education and community input, I believe these skills can help strengthen our schools, support our teachers, and create a thriving environment for Holliston. To learn more about my campaign or to connect with me, please visit justforholliston.org. I'd love to hear from you so we can build a brighter future together. Thank you.
That's it for today. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching Just Thinking. You've done your homework. Now please remember to vote on May 20th. It's important for you, your family, and our community. Thank you.